Welcome to the show both feared and revered by man and beast, the heliosblog. Today, Jordan Peterson dismantles Swedish politicians' womanist worldview. Some things never change.
The reason she's alone is because she's difficult.
Women are not accepting the bare minimum.
Women fuck men they respect.
All the women who say things like, I'm strong, independent, I don't need no man, like, y'all impress me.
Women just gaslight each other and say what they want to hear.
I think so many young men are following you because you have a lot of your audience.
Because I want the best for them, genuinely. I'm encouraging them.
More than you do for young women?
No, not
so
not
why
in the
do
least.
you think so?
Because young men are more rudderless in 2024 than ever before. That's why.
So many are young men.
Oh, well, I think part of it's technological fluke. I mean, I came to prominence, at least in part, on YouTube, because I put my university lectures there, and it happens to be the case that 80% of the people who watch YouTube are young men. So there's that, and it's hard to know how to factor that in exactly. But then I think that young women are encouraged a lot, which is fine as far as I'm concerned. But I think that that's less true for young men now, because we believe that there's something pernicious about male competence and activity. It's part of I suppose it's part of the notion that the best way to characterize Western society is as a tyrannical patriarchy, which is a appalling doctrine as far as I'm concerned.
How come is that?
Well, it's not a tyrannical patriarchy. So it's not tyrannical, that's the first thing. Certainly not compared to any other governmental form that currently exists and has ever existed. And it's not essentially patriarchal unless you believe that women haven't contributed in immense part to the construction of what we have now. So, and I also don't believe that to the degree that it is patriarchal, that its structure is dependent on the expression of power, arbitrary power on the part of men. I think that happens sometimes, but only when things go wrong.
What you're doing and doing now as well is challenging the idea of gender equality that is very important in Scandinavia. I think it's as you probably know.
Well, here's the thing: they have equality of opportunity, right? But what they're pushing for is equality of outcome, which is not the same thing. Equality of outcome leads to very bad results, very bad indeed, and that's the problem. I think. I think that they believe that they're doing something good by promoting this, and they're really not. So that's the problem, I think.
Why do you think that can be a problem? The idea of gender equality.
I don't think that equality of opportunity is a problem. I think that's a great thing, and that anyone with any sense champions equality of opportunity. Indeed. I mean, even if you're purely selfish, say, and purely self-centered, you'd want to set up an economy where everyone who had ability could be maximally exploited by everyone else.
Yep.
Because then we can all benefit from each other's talents. And so equality of opportunity is an absolute...
Not just that, you have opportunity, right? It's not just who you're born as or whose dad you know.
The useful fundamental principle.
So where's
but
the
that
problem?
has nothing to do with equality of outcome. Those things aren't even in the same conceptual universe. And to strive for equality of outcome is, well, it's a fool's game and likely to be extraordinarily, it has proved to be in the past, extraordinarily dangerous as well as impossible. So, I mean, one of the things we know, for example, is that, I don't know to what degree it's common knowledge in Scandinavia, but the biggest differences between men and women in the world in terms of temperament and interest are in Scandinavia, and they've maximized as a consequence of your egalitarian policies.
What do you mean by that?
It's funny that they don't know that. That women maximally choose girl-type jobs in Scandinavia. By girl-type jobs, I mean you know, the jobs that girls like to do. Social, working with children, you know, taking care of people, all that. Whereas men in Scandinavia tend to maximally choose male-type careers, you know, like working with things, working with parts, working, you know, that sort of thing. It's very funny.
Means that the more egalitarian your state, the bigger the personality differences between men and women. That's like
How do you measure that? How do you know that?
Oh, well, psychologists have perfected, at least to some degree, the measure of personality over the last 30 years with very advanced statistical models. And so what you do is you offer men and women...
It's funny because he's so far above their intellect that it's like an adult is talking to children.
Well-validated tests of preference and
IQ
of personality.
Insane.
And you do that all across the world with tens of thousands of people in multi-country samples. And then you look at the difference between men and women, and then you rank order that by wealth and egalitarian social policy. And what you find is the more egalitarian the society, the more different the men and women become.
And the host, he just can't comprehend facts. So why do you say that? It's not.
So then he gets absolutely smacked. Pretty funny.
I would say, for me, it's quite a simple question, actually. Do we want that our sons and daughters should have the same opportunities? And
yes, but they already have those. That's the thing. What Jordan is saying is that already exists. We shouldn't have equality of outcome, which is no matter how hard you work, you're still going to get a shitty result. People that work harder don't get rewarded more. Well, that's a stupid system, because fundamentally, that's not a meritocracy. Fundamentally, that means that you shouldn't work at all, because all of that work that you're putting in is just going to be distributed over a giant population. So what's even the point? And if that's the case, why even work? Because all you're going to do, all that's going to happen is you're going to get screwed by people that don't do anything.
The same dreams or hopes for the good thing, or no? And for me, it's simple to answer that. It's yes, of course. So for me, equality and gender equality is very, very important. For me, also when we talk about
that already exists. I was going to say Helga. Sorry.
Gender equality is
important
for me to learn
Swedish.
my daughter that her mom can lead and show the way, and her dad can hug and kiss her.
Sure, but who's more likely to do that?
Her and show feelings, and I think that's something very important for the hoods where kids grow up, to show feelings, to have these gender equality discussions, to show her a way of opportunities and to strive forward. And it's important both for lonely men, lonely young men, but also for women that feel this roof of glass. They need to.
Yeah, because women don't have the opportunity to be CEOs. No, they do. It's just, even though you have the opportunity to do it, you don't want to do it. And the reason you don't want to do it is because it's not in your natural proclivity to do it. And that's just all there is to
fight
it.
And to struggle the roof of glass to be successful in their lives.
Do you agree on this?
I think that equality of opportunity is a perfectly reasonable proposition. I mean, I have a daughter and a wife. I do everything and many female clients and who I've consulted with and helped, and in many cases helped accelerate the development of their career tremendously. It's obviously of great utility to encourage forward striving in young people and people in general. That's not the issue in the least. The issue is the outcome.
Yeah, well, then why do you think the outcome, and these countries where the outcome is more equal, why do you think that leads to bigger differences between the sexes?
Because there's only two reasons that men and women differ. One is cultural, and the other is biological. And if you minimize the cultural differences, you maximize the biological differences. So I know everyone's shocked when they hear this. This isn't shocking news. People have known this in the scientific community for at least 25 years. And it's...
Oh man, I love their face because they're like, what? Like it's like they're hearing something. Like it's like they're hearing a guy with two heads talk about his culture on this alien planet. It's like, no, kiddo, this is your planet. Facts, data, and statistics, guys.
Been replicated in the last month 3 times in 3 separate samples, including in Science, which is the world's greatest scientific magazine by a large margin. And it isn't a small effect; it's a huge effect.
But excuse me, what does it mean? Does it mean that Scandinavian men and women are having more difficulties meeting each other, talking to each other than other places?
No, not necessarily, but it does mean...
No. That's not what that means. It means the stereotypes are more pronounced.
That there are reasons for differences in participation rates in different occupations that aren't a consequence of socialization. So, for example, this is especially true at the extremes. So, for example, on average, men are more interested in things and women are more interested in people. And that's actually the biggest difference we know of psychologically between men and women. And even though men and women are quite similar, all things considered, the extremes make a difference. So you imagine that in order to become an engineer, look, obviously not everyone becomes an engineer. You have to have a particular temperamental proclivity to become an engineer. You have to be extraordinarily interested in things rather than people. Well, most of those people are men. And if you want to become a nurse, well, then you have to be much more interested in people than you are in things. And most of those people are women. And so you get differences in occupational choice that are also, by the way, quite great in Scandinavia, especially in the case of engineering and nursing, that are mostly due to biological differences, and you cannot minimize that by social engineering. So, and it's not a bad thing. Like, look, one of the things you want to ask yourself is that what is the purpose of setting up a society that offers maximal equality of opportunity? And one of the answers is that you maximize people's free choice. And if you maximize free choice, then you also maximize differences in choice between people. And so you can't have both of those.
But of course it will have differences in choice, of course, because we are human beings. But
yes, but which choices and why are they made? That's the point, man. Does she not realize this? We're not talking about specific people. Solipsistic arguer with an average IQ and a nice suit.
I can't see why it differs between me and Skavlan, for instance. But of course it differs in biological things, but not in choices, because I think more how we raise them, how we live,
So this girl doesn't seem to think that biology plays a role in your choices? You didn't study that much in school, did you?
Education, a sort of culture, attitudes form a human being, whether or not they are a girl or a boy when they grow up. Mm-hmm. And if I raise my daughter to become a leader, to be self-confident, to...
Sure, that will have an effect.
Have a high education. For instance, I think she will have a good platform to become a civil engineer, to become a CEO of a company, sure, or to become a nurse.
Well, that is what people who think that the differences between people who are primarily culturally constructed believe, but it's not what the evidence suggests.
Indeed.
Okay.
Nice.
We don't agree on that.
And again, this is a lady that says, and she seems quite...
Yeah, she seems intelligent, but she was not educated correctly, clearly.
Quite a lot of men, and also young men, are struggling to deal with the fact that women now are more in control of their lives than earlier?
I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is that the idea that the West is a patriarchal tyranny, yep, is rapidly translated into the idea that young men who strive forward are to be regarded with suspicion because they're doing nothing but manifesting the same sort of tyrannical power that has kept women oppressed for the last 2,000 years. And I think that entire narrative is appalling, right to the core. So, and I don't see that it's helpful to anyone, because making young men weak or failing to encourage them to be strong, that's a better way of putting it, certainly does the young men no good, and it doesn't do the young women any good at all if they want to find a partner.
So you're saying that all along, women and men have had the same opportunities, always?
No, I'm basically saying that
they haven't, but now that they do, and they really, really do, and it's not a lie that they do, and there's no tyrannical patriarchy that's holding them back from doing, that they're wrong.
All along, hardly anyone had any opportunities. I mean, if you look at the history of the world, things really started to shift in about 1895. But before 1895, the typical person in the West lived on less than $1 a day in today's money, which is about 2/3 the UN cutoff for abject poverty by today's standards. And so what happened through most of the history of the world is that men and women struggled mightily together, sometimes at each other's throats, but mostly cooperatively, to keep the wolf from the door and the tyrant at bay. Life was very, 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 very difficult. And the fact that we survived it all meant that fundamentally we cooperated despite the fact that we're rife with stupidity, ignorance, and malevolence.
But what's so terrifying with gender equality?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Except when people gerrymander the data. It's like, what do you mean by equality? Do you want women to have their free choice or not? If you do, they're not going to pick occupations that are the same as the occupations men pick.
But we have structures today that women need to struggle. They need to take a step
towards being men?
To have the possibility to become like a prime minister, as we talked before. We don't have had any prime minister in Sweden that have been a woman, for instance.
Okay, but that's because the girls don't want to do it, not because they can't. Do you not understand that? The only way they're going to do it is if they're forced somehow, brainwashed somehow. You don't get that?
We have a lower rate of female entrepreneurs.
Yes!
Men
organically.
had a higher income than women
yes,
in Sweden.
Also organically.
Even if they work with the same tasks.
Yep.
And we need to work with...
That's one that I would dispute.
With gender...
It's not if they do the same tasks. If they're tasked with the same work, they tend to be paid less. But that's not because they're tasked with less. It's because they have the same job title, but they do less at that job than a man in the equivalent position.
Equality,
they take
I
more
think,
sick days.
Even in the lower class in schools, to learn kids how to play with dolls or how to...
What?
Boys how to... We need to. I think we need to learn boys to be more sensitive, but also young girls to become more
You mean weaken them into little babies?
Confident. And I think
it's ironic that these are the descendants of the Vikings. Does nobody else find that funny? That it's become so... Look at Jordan's expression. It's like, you're my enemy.
That's very important to
Well, the problem with that is the data indicate that the consequence of the policies that you're promoting have maximized the differences between men and women. So that isn't what it's doing. Now, that isn't to say that the movement towards egalitarianism is necessarily a bad thing, but a tremendous amount of that's been driven not by social policy, but by technology. I mean, you know, the narrative that we're fed now is that up until 1960, when the enlightened feminists developed their egalitarian doctrines, men had kept women down, and they finally rose. And the truth of the matter is that from about 1895 onward, there was a series of technological revolutions that were extraordinarily powerful in their impact that allowed women to step forward free of many of the burdens that had kept them back in the past. Birth control being one of them, but only one. Sanitary facilities of all sorts, plumbing had a huge role to play, tampons had a huge role to play, as did sanitary napkins. All of these technologies developed that enabled women to move forward with less biological impediments, let's say.
What Dr. Peterson just said there is
that basically it's not like, it's not that men were oppressing them. It's that their own biology was oppressing them, basically. And when their own biology wasn't oppressing them, then they could not get screwed over by it.
Let's get back to the video.
What would you say is the best period in history to be both a man and a woman?
Oh, clearly now. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Anyone who would like to go back...
you worry for the chaos. You worry about the chaos.
Well, you know, it's nice if we could make things better than they are. And I would say that just as all around the world, we're raising living standards at a rate that is absolutely unparalleled in human history, we're also in danger of destabilizing our culture in the West. And I don't think that's a good idea.
Part of that problem you talk about there is what we call the identity politics.
Yes, I think that any political position that puts someone's group identity ahead of their individuality is a regression to a kind of a tribalism that will definitely become violent, because that's what happens to tribes.
What's an example?
You mean of identity politics playing that role?
Yeah.
Well, it happens every time people divide themselves into tribal groups. I mean, what we're trying to do to make peace is to bring people under the rubric of something approximating a single identity, a shared identity. And I mean, the evidence that people fight in tribes, that's the entire evidence of the human race. And the farther back you go in time, and the smaller the tribal groups become, the higher the rates of inter-tribal warfare and the higher the rates of homicide.
And this, you talking about this is part. I think it's part of why you also are. People feel some kind of ambivalence towards you also. We call you controversial from time to time, and I don't know. Do you like that, being controversial?
So in Sweden, right? Because he's debating Swedish politicians. You don't want to stick out, right? That's kind of their thing. They have a social cohesion factor. But anyway, this is just a disguised ad hominem attack.
Controversial? Do you enjoy provoking groups like?
No, and I don't provoke people. I just say what I think. I just say what I believe to be true. Well, I don't.
Have you ever been online?
I say what I believe to be true, and people find that provoking. That's not the same as me provoking people. If I was provoking people, I would be setting out to upset them. And I'm not setting out to upset them. I'm just setting out to say what I believe to be true. And I'm a very...
So you're following the rule we talked about?
Yes, and when I'm talking about gender issues, for example, in personality, that's actually one of my fields of expertise. I know the literature.
He's not trying to hurt you. He's just telling you the truth.
And it says exactly what I said it says. And as I said as well, it's been replicated 3 times in the last month. The London Times came out 3 weeks ago and said that the finding that gender differences maximize as egalitarian policies are developed is now one of the most solidly grounded findings ever produced by social scientists. So, you can make of that what you want. It's not something that I particularly enjoy. It just happens to be the case.
So what are the fake news about Jordan Peterson?
Oh, the fake news is that I'm provocative.
It's an older interview, and we're seeing all of this today with the...
Do you come from an environment where weakness was a bad thing, where self-pitying was a bad thing?
Where self-pitying was a bad thing, I would say yes. I come from that background, but that was par for the course, I would say, when I grew up. And I mean, where I grew up, it was still a frontier place in some sense. My town was only 50 years old, and people were essentially self-reliant to the degree that was possible. It was certainly the case within my family on both my mother and father's side. And the idea was, but this wasn't particularly, what would you say, unique to my family. The ethos was feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to be of much utility. You should get out there and do what you can do. And
straighten your back.
Yes.
Accurate. Actually, that's a very good attitude in life in general. Honestly, if you want to have the results of these great people that you look up to, the only way to have the results that these people have is to work like they do, basically like a dog, and probably even harder than they did. There's no other option.
If you can do that. And I got lots of encouragement from my parents, from both of them. Certainly, I have a very good relationship with my mother, who I loved very much. And we shared a sense of humor, which was lovely. And my dad, although he was a harsh taskmaster, also was very encouraging to me in that he believed that I could do whatever I put my mind to. And he helped instill that conviction in me in a manner that I hope wasn't and isn't too, let's say, narcissistic. It wasn't a matter of privilege. It was a matter of drive and dedication and effort. And so that was...
Jordan Peterson, in my opinion, man, still one of the greatest of all times.
Agreed. GOAT. Alright, let's end the video there. Hit the like, hit the sub, hit all the notifications. Drop me a donation. Like Hunter M, Adrian R, Tom M, Bobby, Dylan, Renaissance Press, Brian, Andrew, and Alan. Shout out to you, most recent purchaser of Strategist Guide to Seduction. Thank you so much for listening, guys, especially if you listen to the end. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Oh, by the way, early access content on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/theheliosblog. And I offer coaching at theheliosblog@gmail.com. Thanks once again, guys, and I'll see you next time.